Method structure. In the previous video I showed you, which classes do we have, that contain all methods, which we can use to write a LINQ query. These classes are enumerable and queryable. You can check the methods we have in Microsoft documentation under these two classes. I changed here the programming language to VB.NET, because we will discuss LINQ using VB.NET in this course. Here you can find each method and all information about the method, like the structure of the method, the parameters, output or also the definition of the method, for what it can be used. To use a method in the correct way, you have to understand the structure of it, so that you will be able to use it. That's what I am going to show you in this video. I will show you using some methods, how to understand the structure of any method and how it can be used. Later in the course I will discuss each method again in detail. For now I will only explain the method structure. But before that let me show you some keywords, which we will use in this video. You have to understand these keywords to understand the structure later. The first keyword is extension method. Extension methods enable you to add methods to existing types, without creating a new derived type, recompiling, or otherwise modifying the original type. In other words, you don't need to change anything on your type, if you want to use the method. For example, we have an integer array and we want to sort it in ascending order. For that we can use the extension method, order by. I can use the method in this way. As you see, I didn't change the integer array or doing anything. I just used the method and it works fine. This is the output of this query. I use the method in this way, just the sequence what I want to sort, then the method. I can also do the same for the following string array. As you see, I use the same method in the same way for two different data types. This is what extension method means and how to use in general. Don't worry if you don't understand this query now. It's only to show you, what are extension methods and how could they be used. As mentioned in the previous video, both enumerable and queryable classes are available in the namespace, system.linq. It means, you have to use this namespace in your project, so that you will be able to use all extension methods of both classes. Most methods under these classes are extension methods, but we also have some methods, which are not extension methods. These are the following methods. What is the difference between these methods and extension methods? I showed you before, how to use extension methods. Only the sequence with the method like this one. Let's now try to do the same using one for these methods. For example, the following query. This query is wrong and the method cannot be used in this way, because it's not an extension method. To use these methods we have to write the class name, then we can use the method. For example, the following expression. As you see, I didn't use any sequence for this method. The output of this expression will be the following. This is the difference between these methods and the extension methods. So, we can use these methods only with the class name. But we can use the extension methods also in the same way. For example, I use the method order by in this way. I can also use it in this way. It returns also the same output. In summary, we can use extension methods in two ways. The first one is the following. We set the sequence and then the method. The second one is the following. We write the class name and then the method. In brackets we write the sequence and also the other parameters, which we need for the method. One last point about these methods. How to know if the method is extension method or not. It's very easy to know that. Just navigate to the method in Microsoft documentation. You can see for this method, for example, the word extension at the beginning. It means, this method is an extension method. Let's see another method. As you see, there is no extension word here. It means, it's not an extension method. That's all about the extension methods for now. Let's now move on to the next keyword, overload. What does it mean? Overload is a feature in several programming languages, that allows several functionally different functions or methods to share the same name. For example, I have the following main class, where I am calling the method printMyInput twice. Each time I have another input. The first one has string input, and the second one has integer number. Below you can see the method. It's implemented twice. The first one has an input parameter of type string. Here I am printing the input parameter into the console. The second method has an input parameter of type integer. Here I am printing the input parameter multiple too. It means, I have two overloads for this method. Each overload has another input parameters. The compiler may choose which overload to execute based on the arguments passed. Let's execute this code line by line, to see which method will be executed. Here I have string text as input. So, the first overload will be executed, because it has input parameter of type string. As you see in the output console, I got the same text. Now I will execute the next line. I have here an integer number as input for the method. It means, the second overload will be executed, because it has input parameter of type integer. As you see here, I got the number 6 as output, which is 3 multiple 2. So, the compiler picked the correct overload, depending on the input I am writing. I had in this example 2 overloads for the method printMyInput. But I can also add more overloads with different inputs or outputs. Or I could only have one overload. In summary, a method could have only one overload, or many different overloads. To find out if a method has more than overload and which overloads it has, you can check the method in Microsoft documentation. There are some methods, which have more than 20 overloads, like sum or max methods. Later in the course I will show you, which overloads are there for each method and how to use. That's all about overloads. Let's now move on to the last keywords, what I want to show you in this video. These are the following: TSource, TResult, TKey, TElement, TFirst, TSecond, and many other similar keywords, which we could have in the structure of a method. As you know, each method often has inputs and outputs. To define a parameter for a method we have to define the type and the name. For example this one here. As you see, I am writing the parameter name first, then I have the type of this parameter. Here I define the variable input string and I set the type string for it. It means, the method accepts only string type. For example the following method. We have first the name of the variable. Its source. Then we have the type. It's IEnumerable of double. It means, this method accepts only input of type IEnumerable of double. So, we define exact the type we need for the method. But some methods don't have a specific type directly, for example this method. As you see, I have the variable name, source. Then I have the type. It's IEnumerable of TSource. But we don't have any data type called TSource. What does it mean here? The meaning of TSource at this point is, that we can use any data type, like integer, string, data table, or any other type. So, it's exact the same like object. But why we don't write object instead of TSource? It's only to make it easier to understand, for what are we using this type? For example TSource is for the input. It means, we can use any data type here, and it should be used for the input source. The same also for the other keywords. For example TResult is for the output result. TKey is for a key, for example in dictionary type. TElement is for an element, and so on. We are using these keywords in LINQ methods. So, each method could have one of these keywords. That's all about these keywords. Let's now see, how is the structure of LINQ methods. If you understand the structure, you will be able to use any method you need in your LINQ query. Let's see the following method for example, any. It determines whether any element of a sequence exists or satisfies a condition. For this method we have the following two overloads. Let's understand how is the structure of these overloads. I will start with the first one. First thing we can see, that this method is an extension method. The method consists in general of 4 parts. We always have at the beginning, public function. So, it's a public function, not private or something else. All methods under enumerable and queryable classes are public functions. This will be called a modifier. After that we have the method name, for example here it's any. After the name we could have brackets like this one here, but it must not be always there. Here it's defined for what we are using the method, but it's not important to understand because we have the same information later in the structure. So, you can ignore this part if it's available. The next part is always set in brackets. It represents the inputs of the method. For example for this method we only have one input parameter, because we only have one parameter. This parameter is called source. It's of type IEnumerable of TSource. After the brackets we have the word as, then we have a data type. In this example we have Boolean. This will be the type of the output, which we will get from this method. For example, this method returns Boolean. Let's summarize the 4 parts of a method. We have at the beginning the modifier. All LINQ methods are public functions. The second part is the name of the method. The third part is the input. And the last part is the output. The most important parts are the input and output. So, let's go deeper and understand what exactly these 2 parts contain. As mentioned, this part is the input for the method. In general, once we want to define an input parameter, we set a name for the parameter and then a type. Here we have the name source. And the type, IEnumerable of TSource. As mentioned, TSource could be any data type, for example, integer, string, Boolean, or any other data types. It means, we have only one input parameter for this method. So, once we want to use this method, we have to set an input parameter of type IEnumerable of TSource. Without this parameter we cannot use this method. I showed you before, which ways do we have to use an extension method. These are the following. Let's now try to use this method in both ways. We have only one input for this method. It's source and it's of type IEnumerable of TSource. This will be the sequence, what we have at these positions. It means, the sequence should be of type IEnumerable of TSource. The queries will be as following. This is how to use the first overload of this method. Let's now see the second overload. As you see, we have here 2 inputs. The first one is the same as what we have in the first overload. The second one is the following. We have first the name, predicate. And then the type, function. So, this parameter is of type function. For such parameters of type function, we use lambda expression. What does lambda expression mean and how to set, I will show you in the next video. The function will be as following. For now no need to understand it. I will explain it in the next video. But let's see where we have to set this parameter in the query. I will use the same queries from the first overload. I will set the function in these positions. In this way, I used both parameters of the method. This is how to use the method with the input parameters. This is only an introduction, how to find out which inputs do we have for a method. Later in the other videos I will show you, how to use each method exactly. So, no worries if you don't understand everything now. The main thing here is to know the structure of a method, like input and output. Let's now see the output. As you see, we have an output of type Boolean for both overloads. It means, if we want to store the output of this query in a variable, it should be of type Boolean. It's very important to know the output of each method. That's all about this method. Let's now check the structure of another method. For example, the method last. This method has also 2 overloads as following. As you see, the first overload has the same structure like method any. But the output here is of type TSource. What does it mean here? For example, I have the following integer array. The query will be as following. The sequence here is of type IEnumerable of integer. So, TSource is in this example equal to integer. The output of this query will be of type integer, because the sequence is of type IEnumerable of integer. The output here is the following number. Let's check the second overload. It is also the same structure as the second overload of the method any. We have the sequence and also a function. For example, the following query. The output of this query is the following and it's of type integer. As you see, it's very similar how to use the different methods. Once you know, which inputs do we have for a method, and how to set the different inputs, you can use the method very easy. Once you also learn lambda expression, you should be able to use any method you need. But I will explain these methods, and all other methods in other videos in detail. So again, don't worry if you don't understand everything now. For me it's important that you know the structure of methods. Let's check another method. For example, range method. As before mentioned, this method is not an extension method. So, we can use this method only in this way. And we have only one overload for this method. As you see, we have 2 inputs. Both of type integer. But the output is of type IEnumerable of integer. This method will be used as following. For example, the output of this query is the following. It's of type IEnumerable of integer. I hope the structure is clear for you now, how to read a method and how to know which inputs and outputs it has. Let me show you one last point in this video. Where to find the methods, and how to know which inputs, outputs, overloads or the definition of any method in LINQ. You can find everything you need in Microsoft documentation. Here you can see both classes, enumerable and queryable. All LINQ methods are listed under these two classes. For example, we have many different methods under enumerable class, which we can use to write a LINQ query. Let's check for example the method any, what I showed you before. Here is the method. It's under namespace, system.linq. Here is the definition of the method, for what it can be used. I have here the word overloads, which means that the method has more than one overload. Here you can see the overloads. And also a description for each overload, for what it can be used. After that we have the first overload with all information we need. For example, here is the method, what I explained before. Under the method you can find the parameters. These are the inputs of the method. Returns represents the output of the method. We have also the exceptions, which could be thrown once we use this method. There is also some details about the exception, why it could be thrown. For example here, an exception of type argument null exception will be thrown, if the source is null. The last thing we have are some examples using the method. After that we have the second overload. We have also the same information, like the method structure, input parameters, output, exceptions, and some examples. So, you can find everything you need to know about the method. Please make sure you select the language Visual Basic. You can see that we have different languages. But in this course we are talking about LINQ using Visual Basic, therefore I selected VB language. Let's check another method, range for example. Here is the method structure. As you see, we don't have the word overloads here, which means that we have only one overload for this method. And here you can also find all information about the method, like input parameters, output, exceptions, and examples using the method. I showed you everything using enumerable methods, but the same also applies for queryable methods. We have the same methods and the same structures. The only difference is the type of the sequences we use. We use enumerable methods for IEnumerable interface, and queryable methods for a queryable interface. That's all about the method structure in general.